Hi there, this is Eshu. I'm the abbot here at Zenwest Buddhist Society. This Living Zen-podcast is just one of the many resources we've created at Zenwest to make Zen practice and training more available and accessible to people all over the world. Instructional videos, printable resources, and much, much more are also available on our website at www.zenwest.ca. If you're a regular listener, I'd love to hear from you. So please drop me an email at office@zenwest.ca and let me know who you are, how you got started, and what brought you to Zen. Everything we make available in person and online at Zenwest is only possible because of the support of our members and associates, people like you. If the efforts of our community are making a difference in your life, I'd like to invite you to show your support and take part in making it happen by becoming an associate or member of the Zenwest Sangha. You can do this by clicking the Join Us tab on our website at www.zenwest.ca. Thank you for your support, and thanks for listening. So today is Father's Day. And today I just wanted to talk a little bit about Father's Day, maybe ask you some questions about Father's Day. We always have every time we schedule for the year at Zenwest, we always have this conversation around my house about scheduling around Mother's Day and around Father's Day, and around whether there's going to be a sit on either of those days. So people were asking me this year, is there a sit on Father's Day? And we've gone through all kinds of variations about whether we sit on Mother's Day or Father's Day. And usually we don't sit on Mother's Day. And that's because, I feel like people should respect and honor and cherish their mothers on Mother's Day, so we shouldn't have a sit. But mostly we don't have a sit because I feel like we should cherish the mother that lives here, and if she wants to have a morning where she's not kicked out of bed so that we can do interview in the bedroom, we should respect that, so we don't. And I've gone back and forth on Father's Day. Sometimes we say we want to have it equal. So if we're not going to sit on Mother's Day, we shouldn't sit on Father's Day either. But then I feel like if I want to have a sit on Father's Day, then shouldn't we have a sit on Father's Day? Isn't that respecting the father's wishes in that case too? So we've had years where there hasn't been a sit for equality's sake. And I grumble and I say, well, nothing's happened, so we should have had a sit. And we've had years where we've gone for hikes, because I like to do hiking. I like to hike. So we've had no sit, and we've had hikes on Father's Day. And so today we have my favorite kind of Father's Day, which is a sit in it. It's also my favorite kind of way to spend my birthday too. I'm always grateful that my birthday is on December 7th, because it's right like the last day of the biggest session of the year, really. Rohatsu. One of the things that working in Zen and taking up this role of abbot, sometimes I've spent time and energy looking at these different role names, Jikijitsu and Shoji and Dentsu and Tenzo and all these different names, and look at deconstructing what the word is and what the word means. And one of the words that's really conspicuous in Zen temples is abbot, because it's not a Japanese word. We use all the Japanese words for all the other stuff, Tenzo and Jikijitsu, but we don't use the word that's traditionally used in Zen, which is juji, for the abbot. And we've chosen to use this word abbot, which is really a Catholic, it's a Latin-based word that means literally father. Abbe. Father. Now, I don't know why that is, or who made that decision, or if it was just sort of collectively adopted. But I think that it's very helpful for me to deconstruct that word and investigate what fatherhood means. I've got 2 kids, and what fatherhood means. Both in terms of family and in terms of Zen practice and filling this role of abbot in a Zen center. One of the things that's come up over and over again for me in Zen practice is that as much as we develop and mature through our lives, we, from the time that we're born, have 2 primary relationships. One is with our mother, and the other is with our father. And as complex and varying and different as our lives might get, in my own experience, as I've sat more and more and practiced more and more and investigated more and more relationships and interactions, what I've found is that a huge number of my interactions and relationships and come back to these 2 fundamental relationships. My relationship with my mother and my relationship with my father. When I was in training, Joshu Sasaki talked about how essentially the whole cosmos was just this interaction, this activity of mother and father. We talk about the plus and minus activity. I don't talk about mother and father so much because they're sort of gendered. But the way that he spoke about it was just in terms of these 2 activities. Plus, and I do talk about them, plus and minus, the activity of arising and the activity of dissolving. The activity of expansion and contraction. And Joshu Sasaki would often refer to the minus activity, the activity of receptiveness or dissolution, unification, as the mother activity, and the activity of arising and differentiation, acting, is the father activity. And if that works for you, that's great. You can use it. And if it really doesn't, then don't. It's really that easy. In my own life, relationship with mother and father really are the foundation of every aspect of my life. They're certainly the foundation of Zen practice in every way. As you probably all know, my mother, well, I should go back. When I was born, I was the third child, and the only boy. So I was sort of the golden boy when I was born. In those days still, and particularly in my mother's family, boys were more important than girls. I remember my sisters having a really sort of difficult relationship with my grandmother because when they would go over and visit, she would basically just ignore them, like they weren't even there. And it was made worse because when I was born, suddenly it was like my grandmother had grandchildren, or a grandchild at least. So my sisters often resented me for no other reason than just the privilege of my birth, being born into this body, granted me a special position, the son. So when my mother died, sort of a bunch of privilege died with her, because she was the major one that sort of held me in this position of esteem. My father, on the other hand, was just the worker. You know, the relationship in my family was defined in some very traditional sort of North American ways. You know, he got up in the morning early and commuted to work, and worked into the evening and commuted home. So often saw him for dinner and then went to bed when I was a kid, just briefly. Often didn't see him in the morning. So after my mother died, my father, I don't think, knew how to do parenting. And so a big part of his drive was to find a person to sort of fill that role. I don't want to get too much into it, but I spent a significant amount of my younger days really trying to make relationship with my father, trying to create relationship with my father, trying to impress and seeking the approval of my father. I think that's the sort of key element. And I really don't think that, you know, I have all the details of my own life. But more and more as I engage in this practice with different people, I see that those two tendencies are really common, if not universal. And the first tendency is to seek the love and acceptance, the unification with your mother, the embrace of your mother. And the second motivation is to be recognized and acknowledged by the father. And this is really, I think, more and more as I investigate this practice and reflect on what I've been taught, this is something that's very deep. This teaching that was given from early days of the mother activity, this receptive activity, this idea that our mother will completely accept and embrace us, and that the father will stand in such a position where they can see us face to face and fully acknowledge and respect and see us as an individual and as an equal, I guess, in some ways. These two motivations are super powerful in our lives, and in many ways, at least for me, when I reflect on them, they've motivated almost every activity in my life. So it's no surprise for me that when I came to Zen practice, I was making many, just continuing the pursuit of these two things, the pursuit of acceptance of the mother and recognition of the father. Zen is a wonderful it's like flypaper if we come at it with those desires. We have this womb of the Zendo and this womb of meditation where we're encouraged to experience the unconditional acceptance, the unconditional embrace of the mother. Prajna paramita, this word we chant all the time, which means the perfection of wisdom, or the wisdom that has gone completely beyond, is often referred to as the mother of Buddhas. And I hope that already in meditation, in Zazen, in this practice that we do, that you've all had this experience of subject and object, the sense of differentiation slipping away, and to feel the unconditional embrace of the cosmos. I refer to this sometimes as our true home, or our original home. But maybe another way of understanding it is like unification with the original mother. And for many years, for me, I played a wonderful game of impress the father. And many people played the role of father for me. My first teacher, Eshu, certainly an older, strong man, leader. Externalize the father. The one thing that Zen does well is it doesn't externalize mother so much. There isn't a sort of matriarch figure so much in Zen, unless you've got a really fantastic shoji, an unusually good shoji. It's difficult to externalize the mother, and it's very there's a lot of encouragement to not externalize the mother and to realize the unconditional embrace that is the cosmos itself. And in the father role, I'm reminded of I don't think it's a Dr. Seuss book, but it's a children's book about Are You My Mother? This egg falls out of a nest and hatches, and the little bird starts wandering around and asking all these different creatures, are you my mother? And I think that in Zen practice, it's really easy to start doing this with, are you my father? Are you my father? Because naturally, with this unifying principle of mother, this minus activity, we're not looking for the external so much. We know, or we're less focused on the external. The minus activity is one of dissolution. So we can externalize the father activity. And at least for me, I did it all over the place. So in the beginning, it was my actual father, looking for the approval and the recognition and acknowledgement, and never being satisfied, never being fulfilled, or never having that sort of itch scratched. So started seeking for it elsewhere. And what you find is that seeking for that approval, you sometimes get approval, but the approval never seems to be quite enough, and it's never balanced with the feelings and the emotions that arise with disapproval. You can be get a great public, verbose, extensive approval, and then one little but or one little critique, even in private, can just gut the whole experience of that approval. So after some time, my experience with my first teacher, I stopped pursuing. In fact, I feel like what was really great about my first teacher is that there was some recognition of the desire for that approval. And that desire can be really manipulated well. You can be moved around by your desire for approval, the Father's approval. Sometimes the Father isn't a man at all, and each of you likely externalizes a father for whom you're trying to gain approval. So I had to find a bigger father, a better father, a more powerful father. So the next step for me was Roshi, Zen master. Literally, what we call those people in this tradition is a patriarch. How much more obvious can you get? The first patriarch. Yeah, so we've got patriarchs. So for me, it was the same thing. I just, this father wasn't doing it for me, so I needed that father. And that father wasn't giving me what I needed. And so I found a bigger father. And one of the things that is clear to me, particularly in an interview, and particularly when people start to become engaged in very intensive practice, I've spoken about this before many times, is that there is some role play that comes in. And being able to acknowledge that and recognize that, and not dismiss it or avoid it or diminish it or belittle it, it can be a very powerful tool. I'm just Eshu, I'm just this guy, but I play this role of abbot, the father of the Zen Center. And knowing that each of us comes into practice with all kinds of business. In fact, like I've said, very little business other than mother business and father business. It makes me an ideal target or an ideal projection screen. And so part of my job is to allow that projection. Part of my job is to almost enhance that projection sometimes, but not to fall into it. To play a role, to become a character, but not to think myself actually that's who I really am. The ability for me to be effective is entirely based on my ability to do the role well, but also to be able to let go of that role well. In the interview room, if we're engaged in an interaction, the whole interview room setup is based on that. I isolate myself. If we look at any stereotypical father-child relationship from popular culture, even in North America. I think of like Leave It to Beaver, right? It's like you need to go see your father in the library. Well, this is the Sanzen room. You need to go see, you got to ring a bell and go downstairs and everybody's quiet and close the door behind you. The whole setup is like this. Then we have this interaction in which one person is watching a demonstration of the other person, and there is, particularly in the beginning, there is this sense of hierarchy. One is the judge and the other is the performer. And that's how we often come to it. And it's certainly how I came to it. Now, as I continued to develop in practice, just as I'm finding with actual children being a father, as they continue to develop as human beings, as we continue to develop our own views and our own understandings and our own strength and our own perspective and our own wisdom, then we come to a place where there is a conflict with Father. And what happens then? Where that external approval, which at first is encouraging and supportive and affirming, develops our sense of self and our sense of esteem, it's just not enough. And there will hopefully come a place where there is a conflict between what the Father, the external Father, thinks or says or does, and what the internal Father. So the internal Father is something that I would describe as the mature manifestation of the plus activity. It's our own adult. It's our own sage. Where these two things are in conflict. And this is a very important point in practice, I think. It's important not to come at this from an egotistical way, where we've got a young man or a teenager thinking that they've got it all together. But at a certain point in our life and in our practice, and it's not even like it's a thorough across the board all the time manifestation, but there comes a point where the conflict is between the external Father, the person, the individual that we've taken as being our source of approval and our source of wisdom, someone outside of ourselves, and we are in conflict with what that is telling us from the source of our own wisdom, the maturity and experience and knowledge that is our own Father. So the one way that we can sort of understand this is the manifest Buddha, the sage beyond our years, the Buddha that is our own nature, fully awake. And this is where we realize that our practice and Buddhism and the Sila and the Eightfold Noble Path and the Four Noble Truths, these are not things that exist outside of ourself. And even if we like, we can extend this more and more and more into every tradition, the 10 Commandments and all of the rules and regulations and even our sort of secular laws. These are external fathers that we seek to gain approval from, that we seek to stay on the right side of, but often haven't come to our own experience and relationship with the heart of that activity. So in our formal practice, we have these different roles. We have Jikijitsu, just taking Jikijitsu and Shoji, for example. And each one of those roles is like a small bite of what it is to be a fully developed human being. Each of them has a set of dynamics that more than the other positions you'll keep bumping up against over and over and over again. If you're Jikijitsu, establishing clear boundaries, knowing and understanding why the rules are there, understanding the impact when sort of structure is not maintained, understanding the function. A really great Jikijitsu is somebody who understands the function of the form and can apply it with wisdom. Yes, the rule is sit still in the Zendo. Yes, the rule is be quiet in the Zendo. And yet there are things that it's more disruptive to give a verbal correction. It's more distracting and difficult for that person to be corrected than to be left alone. It's a huge blessing to be corrected rather than to just be left to flail around. And being a solid Jikijitsu is transitioning from being very focused on what the Zendo rules are to being able to understand the intimacy or the application of those guidelines. And Shoji is the giver. They are responsible for the well-being of the people who are in the Zendo. The nurturer, but a firm nurturer. Not being walked all over, but being kind, generous. Being perceptive about, seeing, oh, that person over there is sweating. Maybe we need some more air. I'm seeing some signs of struggle on that person. Maybe I should speak to them about what's going on for them, if there's anything that we can do to help. Or seeing signs of struggle in a person and just staying aware of it, being available to that person, not interfering with them, but allowing them to know that they are supported and cared about. All of these are little bites, Dentsu and Tenzo and all the different roles. Little bites. But they come together in practice. As we engage in training more and more, they come together. And more as we practice, we are essentially practicing more and more completely this simple activity of absolute mother, or the minus activity, dissolution, unification, one true nature. And the activity of father, differentiation, arising, manifesting, facing, recognizing, and acknowledging, affirming. And more as we practice, we recognize that these two activities that we seek externally, that we're seeking for and looking for and trying to fulfill ourselves with throughout our lives from external sources, we can find no fulfillment from the greatest mother and the greatest father, so long as that mother and father are held outside. And it's not until we begin to fully embody the activity of being mother and the activity of being father, that we can genuinely experience our completion. A lot of the time, Zen practice is a process of simply healing. These activities of mother and father are actually very natural. They're happening in the cosmos all of the time. The very act of our respiration and our day-to-day living, we are manifesting over and over again these two activities of mother and father, minus and plus, reception and arising, negation and affirmation. And in our lives, when we've externalized these desires or these motivators, they are often, because we're dealing with human beings and human situations, fraught with all of the burdens of karma and life and experience that those people we've externalized are carrying. Then this is not the perfect manifestation of the mother, the minus activity. It's not the perfect, complete activity of plus, the father activity. It's not the absolute minus or the absolute plus, absolute mother and absolute father. And that's what we're seeking. And so when we seek and we find the imperfection, we are often wounded. We're often afraid because of our experience. And so a big part of our practice is developing trust. Trust through experience, both with our meditation. This is a trust of the mother activity. And this is why practice, I think, deepens. Meditation practice deepens over time, because it's only over time that we're able to trust more and more deeply in our meditation practice. Little bit by little bit, we let go more and more. Little bit by little bit, we expand, or we dissolve more fully into the experience of the mother, receptivity itself. We become the activity of minus, dissolution. This is why the role, in my mind, of the teacher, the abbot, or if it's a female, the abbess, is so critical, because it is absolutely necessary for that person to be trustworthy. to allow the pain, the difficulty, the hurts and the injuries, the mistakes that have been made by all of the fathers that we've externalized to heal. Because it's only through that healing that we can come to the completion, the recognition of our own Father, our own manifestation, the manifestation of Buddha. Living, breathing, walking Buddha. So that's much more longer than I intended to talk today. But certainly, I guess, the point I'm trying to make is that Father's Day is an important one for me because it's a role, it's a relationship, it's an activity that I've struggled with my whole life, and it's a role that has caused me no end of difficulty and grief, and was used by myself to drag me hither and yon, doing all kinds of things and seeking after the approval of the Father that I externalized. And that Father changed form many times, even in just the 42 years of my life has changed. And it wasn't actually until the great Father outside and the Father inside came into conflict, and I had to to make a choice of whose approval was most important, the external Father or the internal Father, that I was able to even catch a glimpse of where this practice was leading. So my hope for Father's Day, it's funny to me almost that today on Father's Day we have more women than men in the Zendo, which is really actually rare. Because what I have to ask is that everybody, it's not just the men, that everybody manifest their Father. Not their Father, I suppose, the Father, in an absolute sense. And our practice as we go forward is to find the spaciousness, to have the capacity to manifest completely as Mother and completely as Father. The situations and experiences and circumstances of our life are constantly changing. And our practice as Zen people is to arise and meet the circumstance in the appropriate way. And if we're fixated on being this way or that way, if we're fixated on the answer being mothering or fathering, then we are cutting ourselves in half. Each of us has the capacity to manifest absolutely as Mother. And each of us has the capacity to manifest completely as Father. Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.